Hey, hey. Good morning there, YouTubers. Welcome to Mr. Faye's Torchmate tutorials. Be sure and smash that like and subscribe button and turn on your notifications so that I can make $1 billion being a world famous YouTuber. I still have not received any mail money, no mailbox money yet from being a YouTuber. So I still don't know what the problem is, but I'm expecting it any day now. So anyways, we're back here. And what we're going to do today is import some clip art into the Torchmate. So I know some of you have been eagerly awaiting this tutorial so that you can get some clip art and shoot it in. I think for the next assignment is actually not going to be a tutorial necessarily. Well, it might be, but we're going to do some clip art of your own choosing as well. But after you see how it's done in this video, you'll be much more well on your way to getting to be able to just start designing all the stuff that you want to make that's custom and unique to yourself. Okay, so what we're going to do is fire up the Torchmate software, and before I even get started today, I am just going to go ahead and save this as what I want it to be saved as. Right, so I am going to go right here, drop down save as. It's still titled Untitled. I'm going to go into my P drive. Very, very important. Once again, every time I review this, but every time, make sure it's in your P drive. You got to be paying attention to where you're saving stuff. And I'm going to drop down here to my Metal 2 folder, and I'm going to double click that one. Now I'm in my Metal 2 folder, and I am going to hit this one 5-. And let's double check back here. Tutorial, it should be XX, which are your initials, Slow Tiger. So back to my Torchmate, this one will be TF, and then I'll do an underscore, and I'll do a slow underscore, and I'll drop the tiger there. All right, Slow Tiger. Okay, so now we have it titled correctly. We can verify that looking up here. Nothing else on here really matters at this point. We haven't drawn anything. So all right, first thing we need to do is get the image imported, and then we're going to have to do some work to it. Importing the image is not very difficult, but getting it dialed in, ready for tool pathing and ready to cut out on the actual machine is a little more tricky, and that's really what we're going to focus on and go over. Depending on the type of file you have, there are different ways to go about it. We're going to talk in the future about importing DXFs and other vector-based programs. But for right now, we're just going to import basically a JPEG or a bitmap or any kind of like image that you might find on the internet or something like that. So for us, we're going to do it. I have the file that I want you to use saved on the shared folder. So we're going to have to navigate there. Okay, so the way we do it, the way we import or get that image in here is to go to Acquire Image. So we go to File, click File, drop that down, drop here, Acquire Image, and we're going to click the Scan and Trace Wizard. Okay, when we do that, it's going to ask us, pop up a little dialog box here and say, choose an image from either a scanner, a file, or a clipboard. Set options for tracing the image and preview the tracing results. So we're going to go next, and I do not have a scanner installed on this computer, so I can't choose that option. And I don't have any contents on a clipboard right now, so we're going to browse the computer, which is what you guys are going to do as well. So we'll click next. And now yours will probably be blank here. Mine is already up because I've already done this and fiddled with it a little bit, but you're going to hit the 3 dots over here to browse, and here's where you're going to have to find this file. So you got a couple different ways to go to find it, but what we're looking for is the shared drive. Now remember, it won't be on your P drive yet because you haven't saved it there yet, but we're looking for the shared drive. So when you hit that, again, your guys's will already be defaulted into this SLOHS folder. So yours should look like this. And we're going to scroll down here to Industrial Technology. Okay. So click that guy, and we are looking for our Metal 2 folder. There it is. Here's our Torchmate tutorials. And because I'm looking for JPEG files, I see it right here. Now it's possible that your defaults over here might not be JPEGs. Yours could be on bitmaps, in which case this would appear empty. So if you get to this file, Metal 2 folder, Torchmate tutorials, and you do not see it popping up in here, you may have to change the type of file that you're looking for. If you really want to be cautious, just click all files and you'll see everything. Now this sees my PDFs that we have in this same folder, but I can't import a PDF. Torchmate has trouble trying to import from PDFs. So, but with the JPEG should work just fine. So we'll click OK, or we'll click that one and then we'll click Open. All right, now that's directed to the correct spot, we're going to hit Next. Okay. So what this screen is this is a scan and trace wizard, and right now it has the actual size of the pixels. I like to just leave these alone. If these are not at least a few hundred, you're going to have a real hard time with this image. Remember, our grid is set to an inch right now. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4-ish inches across. We're going to modify that afterwards, but trying to mess with these right now is generally not what I would recommend as a good practice. Okay. What we do want to do though is click on this slider to adjust the white threshold. Now for this image here, it's not going to make that much difference, but we're going to want to probably click somewhere near where it is currently. And when I do, you'll see it change color. And you can see that as I move this way, if I go too far, it loses all the white. And if I go too far this way, the same thing. So we're looking for that kind of happy medium, and where it's gonna look kind of crisp, but you can see how some of that internal stuff is fading away there, and it might get a little bit more pixelated. So you're just kind of looking for that medium place in the middle, but this isn't really the ultimate what finishes the scan and trace. You'll see that we get a couple more options after this. So really, as long as you click somewhere near where it was in the middle and you get an image that looks close, that's all you need for now. When we can always retrace it if it doesn't work out properly. Okay, now we'll hit Next. Okay, so this is where your settings come into play. And when we start getting into more specific images, we will start to need to fiddle with these a lot more. You can see things like the line tolerance. Do you want it loose or tight? Do we want it sharp or round? The speckle filter is a common one, especially if you have an image that has a lot of shading and things. It'll get speckly. You'll have a lot of like little pixelated speckles. So we can change and we increase or decrease the speckle filter. Get that guy set how we want. So for right now, let's just leave it alone. The other option we have is to drop this down and maybe find a choice that's similar to what we're doing. Like right now it's defaulted to a logo with complex detail. The other option is a logo with long lines and curves. We also have some text, some scripts. There's actually a few others that we can have access to that aren't currently loaded on here, but let's just leave it at this logo complex with detail. And it's actually not super detailed, but that way we can modify what we want to do. Okay, now here's what we're going to do. If we go Next, it's going to tell us that it's ready to trace the image, and we'll say OK. But it says that the AccuScan now has enough image to trace the image. Click and apply to trace the image. Click apply to trace the image. The wizard will minimize the AccuScan trace dialog. Will appear buttons retrace and finish. So it's going to show us, we're going to have two options after we do it, that it can retrace or finish. If we don't like it, we can always retrace it. So let's hit apply. And this looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that quality. If I wasn't, so I could click finish right now. Now, if I wasn't, I could go back to retrace and I could say, you know what? I think the lines need to be tighter. Let's max this out. That was only one increment though, so I don't know how much difference that'll make. Let's take the small shape accuracy. Tell you what, let's leave that at 9. Let's take the small shape accuracy just to see a drastic change. Let's change this to 10 and see if that does anything. And I'll go Next and apply. Actually, it didn't. It still looks pretty good. I think either way we'll be okay. So I tell you what, I'll just leave that back at 3 where it was, so that we're all going to be on the same page, so that our objects will all basically look the same. Okay, but yeah, and like I say, this is a fairly simple image. As you get into different styles of clip art, those types of things will start to make more of a difference. Okay, so if we are happy with it, we'll just click finish. Okay, now first thing you're going to notice is that it's small, right? It's like I said, it's only a couple inches. If I click here, it's a little over 3 and a little over 2.5 tall. let's just make the width 12. Now let's make sure we have our proportional scaling locked, and we'll hit 12 here and enter, and it makes it 12 inches in size. Now the reason I do that is I just think it's going to be a little bit easier to work with. If we were going to cut something out, very rarely are we ever going to cut out something that's actually only 3 inches in size. The plasma cutter doesn't do a great job of cutting really small parts. It kind of needs larger parts. Otherwise we lose the precision and the detail. So now what I like to do is actually just copy this thing and duplicate it and put it off to the side. That way, as I start messing with it, if I do something that's like really bad and drastic, I don't lose the file and have to go through the whole process again. Okay, so I'm gonna go Control D and slide this guy over here. Okay, that way I just kind of keep an original, and I usually just kind of stick it off of the material size somewhere, and that way it just allows me to keep an original. Okay. Alrighty, now a couple things we're gonna notice, we're gonna take a look at is if we're gonna cut this thing out of a piece of metal, 2 ways to cut it: negative space and positive space, right? So what we're trying to do right now is make the black part the positive space, so the metal itself. The negative space, or the white parts, would be the hole. Now, you'll notice right now that the white parts are actually in fact white. That means there are shapes there because you cannot see the grid line behind them, right? The grid lines disappear, which means that there are shapes there. So, and right now this whole thing is a path, so they're all connected because when it brings it in, it does a make path as it traces and converts the image. So if you wanted to, I can show you here, if I just select, in order to select any specific part of it, the first thing I have to do is break the path. So if I go to Arrange and Break Path, now each piece is its own thing, right? So if I click on this part here, you'll see that I selected this, some of the striping in the tiger face. But if I click something like the L, you'll notice that the red line starts to show up around the outside. That means I have that L selected. And you'll notice, and we haven't talked about this yet, but this is the color palette up here. So it's showing me that it's using a red, green, blue RGB type color palette, and it's using 255s across the chart. So it's basically invisible, but it is a color. So is the black, right? The black is the P2. This is the P3. So if I wanted to, I could change it. I could highlight it and come down here and use like P4, right? And it turns that to a different color. I'm going to go ahead and do that for these parts. I'm going to do that for the parts that I want to be the parts cut out. And really the reason I'm just doing that is just to show you that these parts are in fact, they are in fact actual geometry. It's not that this is the edge of my part yet. That's what we need to create. We need to get that part created so that we can start to weld some parts together and get these to make it so something we can actually cut out of metal. Because right now, all this part, the outside frame, if I was to get this thing converted to a tool path, and I got these parts converted to tool paths to cut out the interiors, this O would be floating. So would all this detail, right? But these are just holes inside of holes. The green is all a cut. So if I select the green here, you could see the cut path that the torch would take would be this outside edge, and all this stuff would no longer exist. I could cut all this out first, but then when I did the next path here, all that stuff would fall through. So what we need to do is get that converted so that we can get rid of that inside part and make it actually clear. Okay. So what I'm going to do there is actually take this part and I'm going to hold Shift. So let's start with just the face. Okay. Because there is the most detail that we have to fix. There's really not a lot. The L is basically ready to cut as soon as we get it converted properly. And then the O, we have to do a little bit of work to tie these together. We have to put a a tab between them so that it's not floating in this. You can't have the hole within the hole. So we'll show you how to do that later. But this is going to be the most work. So let's start with this one. So by clicking in here and then holding Shift and clicking out here in the black part, I've selected just those two things. And if you zoom in here, you can see the red line around these edges. So if you're going to make this inside part another color, like I did green, just don't use a red or a pink because you don't see that red line very well. Yellow works good, green works good, blue works fine, but you don't want to use a red one because then you can't see what you have selected very well. So by holding the Shift, couple keys on the Shift click to get multiple things. One is you see the red line, but two, when I got the outside edge of this, you also saw the grips, our little squares up here, our nodes that it holds on to. It pulled those out larger, which means I have both of them selected. So with just those two selected, I'm going to make those two a path. Okay, that's good. That's actually what I wanted to have happen, because now you see the difference. The white is gone. So that actually now took this as a piece of metal, which is good because we'll come in and add the other parts to it, the other detail to it later. But now these parts right here are all individual, and this is one piece. So it's one path. Now that other geometry is still there. If we turn off the show fill, which is in the options view, show fill, or the hotkey is Alt S, you can see that geometry is still there. It did turn green because I had that selected green, but we'll come back to that in a little bit. I'm actually going to leave the show fill on for right now because I want to kind of talk about the next edits that we have to make to this guy. Okay, so this part is now one object, which means this piece is metal. This is all metal, and this is all metal, and these parts will be metal, but right now they're just floating in space, right? So we have to connect them. So let's start up here with these guys. And I think the best way to do this, there's a few different ways to go about it, but I think the best way to do it would be to move them all up and then weld them to this top edge. So that way we still have the texture of tiger stripes, but they're connected because, got to connect them somehow to some metal. And the more of these types of things that you do, the better off you'll get at learning kind of how to connect and what the best way to connect and weld things together will be. So what I'm going to do is hold Shift, and I'm going to grab all of these, and just those four. I want to make sure I have all four, and I'm just going to arrow up until they overlap. And like right here is not enough overlap. You can see this inside, this one missed. That one would have this, the torch would try to come in here and cut that little part out. So I want to make sure I give it enough overlap that they're kind of all the way connected, right? Size and scale is always going to change a little when you're trying to cut out a design out of a piece of metal. Okay, so with that overlap looking good, now what I can do is hold the Control key, or excuse me, not Control, Shift, and click this one as well. And you can see now I have those double lines showing up there, which then should allow me to do a basic weld and put those pieces together. Okay, cool. So you'll notice when it did that, it jumped in and it found some other options here, but right now I'm not too worried about any of that stuff. Although maybe I should be, because there are some issues that come across with leaving them that color. But let's keep going. We'll keep working on the face, and I'll get this part figured out after. Okay. So this part all looks good right here, right? This part right here, I think that's a big enough, this part's holding it. There's enough material there. This is going to hold. I think that's a large enough slice that the torch will be able to get in there and cut one. Uh-oh, I just accidentally moved a piece. Oh man, that was a bad deal. Look at that. I scooted it off to the side. Luckily, we've got an undo button. Also, what might not be a bad idea, I should have maybe done this before we got started, highlight all of this and put the center of it at a specific location. Maybe 10, 10, just so that we do, in case we did actually move something accidentally off where it shouldn't be, at least we know a location where it should, if one of them got moved and I for whatever reason, I couldn't just immediately hit the undo button. I do actually have a location. So the dead center of this one, chosen from the middle nub, is 1010. Okay. So this part's good. We need to clean up some parts in here. Let's take a look at how we're going to do that. I think this one will be pretty easy. I'll just drag it up. I could arrow up too if I wanted to go straight up, but I might want to go a little bit of side to side too, just to give myself some room. But again, I'm just going to overlap what's existing metal. And I'm kind of thinking about it as though I did have two pieces of metal and I wanted to weld them together. I'd want to overlap them a little bit and run a little weld across this edge. Of course, then they'd be at different heights, which we want them to all be the same thickness. But for our purposes, you can think of it as welding this piece, hold shift down and choose the other piece, which is this outer edge here, and then do a basic weld to get those guys together. Okay. So now if I click on this part, you'll see what it highlights is the whole outside, all this stuff here. Didn't do anything with this stuff yet because we still have to work on that, but we'll get that taken care of in a bit. So that one's now hooked up and looking good. This one, I think what we'll do is drag that one down and maybe just get a little intersection here. And let's scroll out a little bit just to see. Yeah, I think that'll look good. Got to have enough material there holding it. If you tried to put this like this, that's overlapped and it will weld. The machine will let you do that. If I was to click weld right now, it would. But there's no way when that 60,000 degree or 30,000 degree Fahrenheit torch comes around, the plasma torch cuts when the air is atomized, the compressed air becomes ionized. It actually hits temperatures at the end of the electrode of 60,000 degrees Fahrenheit. By the time it gets to the metal, it's between 17 and 30,000 degrees Fahrenheit. So anyway, my point is that when it comes down here and then it hits this edge and then it comes up, there's no way that when it comes back around and then cuts to here that there's enough metal there to hold it. It's just going to melt this piece off. So it would end up looking like that because it would just get melted off, right? So we'll do an undo because I deleted that one. So what we should do instead is just bring that down, make sure we have enough meat, enough material there to kind of grab a hold to. Again, hold shift and select the two objects we want to weld together. And another basic weld, get that guy welded up. Okay. These parts right here are a little tricky. If you wanted to try to mess with those, feel free to do that. If you can come up with something that you think looks good. I am just going to simplify it. Just going to delete them. Highlight it, and I'm just clicking delete on my keyboard because I think that still looks pretty good. It still looks like the slow tiger, which, by the way, just in case you didn't realize, this is an S, this is an L, and this is an O, and it's also the face of a tiger with its mouth here, right? I've had students, I'm amazed, I've had students who only saw the SLO, had no idea this was a tiger, just thought it was decorated funny. And I've had other students who only thought it was a tiger, never noticed that it said SLO. So anyway, just throwing it out there, just in case. I imagine most of you knew, but if you didn't, that's fine. It is all good. Now you just learned something new. So we're back to this one. Let's take this guy. I think we should probably keep that one. If you want to see what it looks like deleted, you can always just delete it. And then if you don't like it, you just hit undo. That's what I do. Just kind of see how it's going to look. And then from here, I think on this one, we'll probably slide it up like, maybe just go like that. How's that look? I mean, that keeps some of the stripes in there. How did I do it on my demo here? Yeah, I kind of scooted it down and rotated it, so I had a little more texture on it. Let's go with that. I think I like that better. So what I did here is just kind of maybe pull this down a little more. And then you can also rotate any object you want by grabbing the little arrow right there. Give it a little spin just to get a little more meat across those two. That looks pretty good. Yeah, that'll work. Personal preference, up to you guys. And you guys have some freedom on this one to kind of, yours doesn't have to look exactly like mine. It should be recognizable as our school logo. But other than that, up to you. If you want to just get rid of that piece, you can. Again, we'll do another basic weld. And okay, I think if I click this now, this all looks pretty good. It's all one piece now. There's no floating parts anymore. We deleted those other ones here, and this is all connected and welded. Now the issue that I'm seeing that we're going to run into is that some of these parts are too small and they're going to melt off. So we got a couple different options to deal with that. One is we just make this thing bigger, right? I just make, oh, well, just make it a 4-foot diameter sign. Except that most of the time we don't really want to do that. Usually we are constrained by some sizes. You know, somebody wants a sign for their building, they wanted a specific size, or somebody wants to put something on the door. Obviously the sign can't be bigger than or even as big as the door because it's got to have a little bit of room on the sides for the door to open and close and that kind of thing. So what we need to do is just modify a little bit of this. And this is where our node editing is going to come in. So from the last tutorial, you guys learned how to edit nodes. And so we're going to do some more of that this time. What I'm going to do is like this guy right here, this would just melt off, too narrow. So what I'm going to do is actually stretch this side out and make it thicker so that it's got more material there to absorb the heat as it's being cut, and it should work. I'm going to create myself a little template tool by drawing a rectangle. Just something like this, doesn't really, whatever, doesn't matter. And then, but I'm going to give it a width of 1/8 of an inch, 0.125. 0.125 is 1/8. Quarter of an inch is 0.25. Half of a quarter is 1/8. So half of 250 is 125. So that's the thickness of this part right here, which means that's about the bare minimum that I ever want to have. An 1/8 will hold. It's risky, but it'll hold. 3/16 or 0.18 is better. 0.1875 is decimal equivalent of 3/16. So this is kind of now just my guide that if I kind of put it over here, I'm not actually going to use it for anything other than to just sort of use it as like a measuring tool. I can see that it's thicker than this, so this isn't really going to work. So we can edit these nodes the same way we edited in the last tutorial. We have it selected, and we just give it a double click. And when we do that, it's going to tell you that your instant replay will be lost. That's fine. We're not really too worried about our instant replay. So we'll click OK. And now you see this whole shape. It's all the nodes around the tool path, or it's not a tool path technically. It's gonna become a tool path, but it's still just our geometry. But you see all the nodes that pop up like we learned about last time. Okay. So what I'm gonna do is highlight these, and let's see. I'm gonna have to hold the Shift key down to select the rest of these. Oops. Messed that one up, but that's okay. We can fix it. I'm gonna grab all of these, and I'm gonna let go of the Shift key. I'm gonna hover over one node, and I'm gonna drag them. Okay, see what we got going here. So I think it looks pretty good thickness wise. Remember, this is my 1/8 inch across the green part there, so you know, about there. I could give myself a little bit of extra room. So, and I don't want this bottom edge to start to get, you know, pointy down towards the mouth. I want that to kind of remain the same reveal. So I'm just going to click parallel, and let's go with somewhere in there. Okay. Now, I accidentally drug this part out. So I could try to drag this back in, which I could probably do, make it look halfway normal. Or if I wanted to, I just highlight both of those. So imagine this was still bumped back out. And this is what I'll do a lot of times is if I have something like this, I don't like the shape of that, I'll highlight the two of them, drawing a box around them, or holding Shift and clicking on them both, and delete them. And then it just kind of takes that, it takes some of those points out. Now, obviously, some areas you don't want to do that because you don't want to have, like, you wouldn't want to delete, say, I don't know, this one, because then this line might get kind of straight. So, and then these ones got a little bit tweaked when we did that. But again, remember, this is just kind of rough artwork. So we can always just fiddle around with these nodes to kind of get this to look about how we want. Scroll out and give it an eyeball. That looks pretty good. Let's say apply, see what it looks like. Yeah, that's not too bad. Okay, I think that's going to work because this hole here is maybe a little under 1/8. But remember, when you're cutting a hole out, if it burns a little extra off the sides, that's not going to hurt anything. It's when you have a thin part that you're trying to save the metal. that's where you run into issues. Okay, if you're trying to do clip art with like a fishing pole, the fishing pole has to be kind of thicker than it would actually be. Otherwise, the fishing pole is just going to melt off. I've had that happen many times. Things like that. Sometimes swinging a golf club or a fishing pole or those types of things. You have to have enough material there to absorb some heat. This is the other one I'm worried about. So I'm going to sneak in here and maybe just do the same. Draw a box around those ones. And actually, yeah, maybe I'll draw the box around these ones. And I'm kind of looking for a good place to like where if I drag up, is it not going to look too bad? If I go right here, this one's just going to turn and go straight up. So I think I'd probably come and select a few more of these ones, maybe to there. And guys, if I'm going too fast for you, feel free to just pause the video and do a couple things and then turn the video back on and, you know, do your thing, right? Take your time. So now I can drag those up. And yeah, it's not bad. That's thick enough, I think. And kind of compare it with our little spacer that we drew. And I think that's good. Should be all right there. So I'm gonna apply that, but then I'm gonna double click it and fix this up a little bit. So those two I'm gonna delete. And I'm actually gonna delete like 4 of these. And that should kind of clean that up. And maybe I'll just sort of bring this one down, kind of round this up a little bit, maybe bring that one over here. Okay, up to you. If you don't like how pointy this looks back here, you know, round it out. We can always throw another, put another one of those in, and you know, I could delete that one. I right click on it to delete, and then maybe bulge that out a little bit just to kind of smooth things out there. All right, looks like so. Okay. All right. I'll keep this for now. I don't think we're going to need it anymore, but so this looks pretty good. We're close here. Now, let's see what happens if we just try to make the whole thing a path. I want to not select this piece though, so let me move it even further out of the way. I don't want that to become part of my path. Okay, so now let's give this a try. Highlight the whole thing, and I'll go make path, and it worked. Okay, turned everything green because that's what we have selected. So as you work on it, it selects them on whatever color you had selected. Let's put it back to black. So I'm going to highlight the whole thing, put it back on to so back to black. The reason for star matter is when you go to, it's not as big a deal for making and breaking paths, but for welding things, the colors do start to matter. If you have color difference, it won't necessarily weld properly. So in fact, I'll show you right now, because we're gonna need to put a tab, a linking bar or linking tab to hold this O in place. So I'm gonna put it down here. You can experiment with where you think it looks best. You could maybe do it from the top. Might look better from the top, but I'm afraid it might make it look like a U then, right? Because this comes down and opens up and then comes back up. I think if we put it from the bottom, it might look okay. So I'm actually going to utilize this for my bar. Now this is too thin, and I think it would look weird. I want it to look a little more proportional to kind of match what's here, and it's going to hold all the weight of this. So that's the other thing, is when you're looking at something being an 1/8 or how thick it should be, you have to kind of consider how much weight is it going to hold. If it's just connecting somewhere, this is only holding the weight of this little piece, but this is going to hold all the weight of this whole thing. So depending on where you're mounting it, how you're mounting it, how heavy the material is, how thick the material is, all those types of things, you have to take all those into account when you're making linking tabs and things like that. I think something like this probably looks pretty good. Okay. Now I'm going to drag this up, and then I don't like the angle there. It looks, everything is kind of slanted, and this looks too vertical. So I'm going to kind of match the angle. That's probably okay-ish there, right? So It kind of aligns with these. These aren't exactly parallel, so you just sort of pick what you think looks best. Maybe I don't know, maybe a little bit less steep. Again, up to you, kind of personal preference. Um, so let's go there. Now, I need plenty of overlap, and I don't quite have enough on the top, and a little bit too much on the bottom. So I can just move this. But if you drew your rectangle, and even this one here, it's this side looks okay. I don't want it actually extending up here into the white space. You'll see why in a minute. And same thing down here. I don't want it extending past. I just want it to be in the black here and in the black there. So this one's a little too tall, so I'm going to shrink it. And now that I've turned it at an angle, it shrinks a little bit funkier, but that looks pretty good. Okay, so that's what it'll look like once it turns black. But I want to show you what happens when we try to weld stuff to the wrong color. It will do stuff, but it's not necessarily going to do what we want it to do. So if I hit this one, which is the outside hole shape that we currently have metal, and I need to tie this one to it. So I'm going to this one, and I'm going to hold shift and choose the green one. Okay, now we should be able to just basic weld this. But when I hit this button, it does this. And this is, it cut it off. It used it to basically trim the part. So there's no more, you notice now when I select it, there's no like extra tail down here. So it did do something, but it didn't weld them together. This thing selects, look at the grip boxes, or the nub boxes, I should call those. They're not, I guess they're nubs, not grips. But those nubs are only selecting this part, whereas over here, it selects all this part. Well, that's not really what we want to happen. So you say, okay, well, maybe I could do like so let's do an undo. Maybe I could do a different kind of weld, right? We have the different types of weld. So if I hold this one and I hold shift and I choose this object here, which also chooses the O because it's part of the path. Let's say we chose like, let's say we did the and weld. Whoop. Okay, so that's the opposite of what we just had, right? Last time it kept that bar in between. This time it just kept what was left there. That's obviously not what we want. So we undo that. And then the other one is the XOR weld, but that does something kind of similar where if I deleted this, that doesn't really help me at all. So, and that's doing this because these colors are different. Now the weld tools still kind of work the same way, but the basic weld is the one we should have been able to use here, but because they're a different color, it didn't work. So let me do an edit and an undo. And so now before I weld it, I'm going to put it on the same color. So now it's on the same color. And now when I choose this one, hold shift and choose that one. And now if we do a basic weld, should be good. There we go. Okay. So now it's looking good. This is what I think we're pretty much ready to cut this guy out. We have, if I click on it, I don't see any parts that would be floating. I don't see any holes within holes. This is going to be linked, so this is all metal. So you got to think about what's the torch going to do? Well, it's going to come in here and cut out this middle part of this O. And it's going to move over here and it's going to cut out this eyeball. Think about this whole, like it's a whole big sheet of material right now. So it's going to cut out the eyeball. Then it's going to maybe jump over here and cut out the O, right? Right here and come up and around and back over, cut this part out. Then it'll lift up and maybe come over here and cut out the face. So where you choose to cut the face out, we'll talk about that when we get into tool pathing, but it would come in and follow all this around and make its way through here and up and around and around and around and around and all the way it goes till it finishes back to here. Then this part's cut out, this part's cut out, this part's cut out, the eye's cut out, last part's cut out the L. So we'd come in here, cut out the L, and you would have it. Oh, well, no, you wouldn't. You'd have to cut out the outside. So now you just have those holes in a big giant piece. But then to cut the outside, we just start to cut somewhere and then follows it around like so. And when it gets back to this part, you're done. You've got your part and you've got your slow logo. So we went from this to this. But that's, you know, then that's the other reason I like to keep a duplicate image here is, so if I want to refer to the original artwork, just to kind of see, like if I'm making major design changes that are really going to make it look drastically different, I kind of want to see that. I want to see how it's going to look or how different it's going to look. If it still looks pretty recognizable, most people wouldn't even notice type of thing, or if it's going to completely change the way it looks. So that's why I kind of do those things. It's one of the reasons I like to keep this guy here. I can refer to it. I've done this logo so many times over the last 15 years that I kind of know what works for it, so I didn't have to refer to it much. But if I'm doing new artwork, I'll definitely refer to the original image quite a bit more often than I did in this tutorial. Okay, so at this point, when we saved it earlier as a name, if we just closed it now, we wouldn't save any of those changes, and there would be nothing here. So be sure you get in here and give this be sure you get it a save. Because the name is already correct, I don't need to do save as now. I can just click save. But if you always want to double check, be sure you're saving to the right location. I like to sometimes because I just want to make sure I do have this saved correctly. It's going to be right here. We're going to call it 5 TF Slow Tiger. You guys are obviously not TF, but and then I'll click save, and then it'll give me the little message say it already exists. You want to replace it? Say yes, because I like this one better. Okay. All right, cool. So you got that figured out, and you'll be ready to start importing your own images and your own clip art and stuff soon. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Happy to help. And be sure this one's saved in your P drive so I can take a look at it later. And good luck. Holler if you need me. Be sure to like and subscribe.